Good morning. My name is Jisoo Kim. I'm Director of the GW Institute for Korean Studies and Korea Foundation Associate Professor of History, International Affairs, and East Asian Languages and Literatures. I am so delighted to welcome all of you to the 26th Hahn Moo-Sook Colloquium in the Korean Humanities series at GW. And thank you all for coming so early and also in this rain. Before I make my opening remarks, I would like to make one announcement that unfortunately Ambassador Cho Yoon-jae was unable to join us this morning due to an urgent issue that came up at the last minute. But fortunately, we have Director Hwang here with us today, who is the Korean Cultural Center, the Director of the Korean Cultural Center in Washington, D.C., is here with us on behalf of Ambassador Cho to give his congratulatory remarks. Thank you, Director Hwang, for being here with us today. And before I have the great pleasure to introduce our honorable guest speakers, I would like to say a few words about this year's Hahn Moo-Sook Colloquium and acknowledge our co-sponsors. Before I have the great pleasure to introduce, so in order to celebrate the 100th birthday of Hahn Moo-Sook, the Department of East Asian Languages and Literatures worked together with the Institute for Korean Studies to organize the 26th Hahn Moo-Sook Colloquium. And this year's colloquium is the 26th, which means that it has been organized every year since 1995. And Professor Kim-Renaud, who just arrived, we began late because she was not here. But anyways, she's the founder of the colloquium, and she's been organizing this every year until she retired in 2015. And I succeeded her role as the main convener of the colloquium since 2014. And I would like to emphasize that Hahn Moo-Sook Colloquium in the Korean Humanities series at GW provides a venue to discuss something other than North Korea in Washington, D.C. And this complies with the mission of the Institute for Korean Studies in that one of our missions is to diversify Korea-related issues in the nation's capital, where most of the discussions taking place around North Korean nuclear issues. So, as shown in the program, the theme of this year's colloquium is on emotions in Korea, and we received more than 200 RSVPs, including both days, and it is just so wonderful to find so much attention. We receive so much attention, not only from the graduate students and just undergraduate students in the greater DC area, but also DC community in general. And so thank you all for coming to our event, and I'm confident, and I can say this because I've read all the papers, that you will enjoy the discussions today and tomorrow. We have 20 distinguished scholars in the field of Korean studies presenting and discussing extremely interesting research on emotions in Korea. Excuse me. I would like to acknowledge our co-sponsors because it would not have been possible to have this colloquium without their support. Academy of Korean Studies, Korea Foundation, Literature Translation Institute of Korea, GW Seeger Center for Asian Studies, Institute for Ethnographic Research, and Columbian College of Arts and Sciences. I would also like to thank GWIC staffs, Yuson Choi, Minhye Kim, and Grace Kim, who worked tirelessly to make this today's event possible, and also Seeger Center staff, Richard Haddock, and student volunteers who are helping today and tomorrow. Since it would take more than 5 minutes to, now let me have the great pleasure to introduce our honorable guest speakers who are here today with us to make our event even more special. And it would take more than 5 minutes to introduce their accomplishments. And there's no way I can do justice in introducing them just in a minute or two. And I was given only 5 minutes in total. So I would like to ask our audience to respectfully to refer to their bio in the program. But since we were not able to include Director Hwang's bio because we heard from Ambassador Cho at the very last minute, and it was after we had printed the program, so I will briefly introduce Director Hwang. And Director Jun-Seok Hwang is a current director of the Korean Cultural Center in Washington, D.C. He first joined the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism in 1991 and has since held a number of positions within the ministry as well as the Korean government, such as Director of the Culture, Tourism, and Global Citizenship Bureau for the Presidential Council on Nation Branding in 2009. And most recently, he served as a Director of the Culture and Ceremonies Bureau within the Pyeongchang Organizing Committee for the 2018 Winter Olympic. So please welcome Director Hwang.
Thank you so much. I'm honored. It's me an honor to be here with Ambassador Stevens and Chairman Kim and many distinguished scholars and guests. I should start by saying that Ambassador Cho unfortunately wasn't able to join us today due to a sudden change in his busy schedule. However, he asked me to convey his sincere regrets as well as his best wishes to the organizers, presenters, and attendees here. As you know, the Hahn Moo-Sook Colloquium was established to commemorate one of Korea's most honored authors and to uphold her spirit of openness, curiosity, and commitment to education. This year marked what would be her 100th birthday. I'm sure that if she were here today, he should be amazed at the scope of the weekend's discussions. As you know, the theme of this colloquium was emotion, culture, and subjectivity in Korea. When learning about Korea, emotion is often one of the first aspects of culture that people around the world encounter. Perhaps in songs, a book, and simple conversation. And yet, it is one of the most difficult aspects to truly understand historically. As director of a Korean Cultural Center, I applaud this commitment of GW to Korean studies. Today, we work toward the same world goal of mutual understanding. Programs like this colloquium play a critical role, offering a deep dive into Korean culture and society that will fascinate the pop culture fan and the policy experts alike. So I offer my sincere thanks to the University and Institute for Korean Studies on this occasion. Although I'm alive in Washington just a few months ago, I look forward to an enlightening event and many more in the years to come. Thanks. Thanks again.
Thank you, Director Hwang. Our next honorable guest speaker is President and CEO Kathleen Stevens of Korea Economic Institute of America, and she was a former U.S. ambassador to the Republic of Korea between 2008 and 2011. We are very grateful that she's here with us today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It really is a great delight and an honor to be invited to join you again in this beautiful setting, which I've been to many times. I mean, a sign of the leadership role I think that George Washington University has played over the years in deepening understanding of Korea and indeed of U.S. policy. Oh, sorry. And, do you want us to change that? They know I'm not Mr. Hwang. But it's also a pleasure to be here with Director Hwang, who's done so much since first arriving in Washington just a few months ago. And for those of you who are visiting Washington, I'm going to do a plug for the Cultural Center here. It's just been renovated in a very creative and moving way, and it's a great place to stop in Washington. And I'm also very pleased to join Chairman Kim, Jisoo, Professor Kim, Professor Brzezinski, Professor Brinker. I mean, what a great collaboration within this university and with your partners on the outside. I am well familiar with the Hahn Moo-Sook Colloquium, and through that and through a speaker we're going to hear from, her daughter, I've learned much more and deepened my own understanding, I think, of Korea's modern history, Korea's modern journey, through her life, through her writings, and through the colloquium that's gone on now for years to examine some things that I think are not well examined in Korea's modern history. The role of women to some extent, the role of experience on the ground, the kinds of things that really are, I think, intrinsic to actually having an understanding of the dynamics of a country, but are often left out not only of, if you like, formal curricula in various disciplines, but also in the area I come from of diplomacy and international relations and negotiations. It's very hard to integrate all that into an understanding of a country, of relationships. So I think this colloquium has played a very unique role over the years in highlighting some of these issues and some of these accomplishments. But this year you've really topped it off with something very, very creative. And I am so impressed with the range of scholars who are here. I'm looking forward to hearing the presentations, to reading the papers, to sharing them with others. I think this is something that's actually been very missing, if I may say, not only, again, in academia, but in the policy world, and thinking about Korea, and thinking about not only the Republic of Korea and its relationship with the United States, but about the Korean Peninsula as a whole, its past and its future. You had now you have my name up there. I enjoyed the word, do you call these word clouds or tag clouds or something, you know, when you have all these words, right? And when I was thinking about it, and I was looking at them, and I was thinking about, for those of you who, like me, are not native speakers of Korean, but of, you know, lifelong strugglers in the language, I was thinking about when I first encountered Korea and Korean for the first time in 1975, so 43 years ago, as a young woman arriving in Korea with no Korean language. And I was thinking about the word cloud that I would have of the words that I heard most frequently that didn't necessarily come up in my textbook, you know, where I was learning things like, you know, tabang 어디 있습니까, you know, or, you know. But, and tabang is a big word in the word cloud too. It's totally disappeared from the Korean language, by the way. But anyway, but, you know, there were these other words, and generally the words the Koreans would then say, but you really can't translate that. Now, you know what words I'm talking about, right? Han, right? Kibun. You know, I learned those words my first week in Korea. Those are emotional words. They're words about emotion. I learned that, you know, sometimes we say the languages in the far north of some of the native peoples of Alaska have 10 words for snow. I learned that Koreans have a lot of words for heart. And actually, they think that the heart is not the only part of the body that's related to emotion, right? There's the liver, which I never really understood, but that would be part of the word cloud too. But, you know, I remember that beautiful word, of course, coming from Chinese, and that beautiful character showing the heart, shim, right, with the heartbeat there. So powerful, so moving. But Koreans have their own words too. Maum, you know, maum 좋은 사람, that'd be 가슴, yeah, 가슴 벅찹니다, you know. Things that I heard and I learned, even if I couldn't use them within my first couple of weeks in Korea. So that's just a way of saying, instinctively I know that what you're trying to do as scholars is very important. It's very hard to do, I think, because I think we're trained, whatever our fields, to think that emotion is something you almost set aside for a lot of what we try to do. Subjectivity is not something we're really looking for. But we need to understand this, and I appreciate the rigor, the commitment, and the passion that you're bringing to your professions and your studies, and to a better understanding of Korea, such an extraordinary place, such an important place for the United States and the world. So I know this will be a very vigorous and creative conference. I think it will lead and open up possibilities for lots and lots of work in the future. And again, I congratulate everyone who's participating and look forward to your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Stevens. Now I think I feel even more motivated to publish these papers. Okay, so now our next honorable guest speaker is Chairman Hoagy Kim of the Hahn Moo-Sook Foundation. He's also the director of the Hahn Moo-Sook House. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Please welcome.
Honored guest, Mr. Hwang, Ambassador, students, faculty, ladies and gentlemen, my friends. I'm honored and delighted to speak to such an excellent audience in this great university at the center of the beautiful Washington. My mother, Hahn Moo-Sook, passed away a quarter of a century ago. Feels like yesterday that I came to attend the Hahn Moo-Sook Colloquium 10 years ago when we commemorated her 90th birthday. But 10 years have gone by. It's just like in the blink of an eye. And we are already commemorating her 100th birthday. I'm so touched and grateful that the colloquium series not only continues through the time, but also is healthy and prospering. Even though my sister Young-gi is founding convener, officially retired from GW and became an emeritus already 3 years ago. I understand today's colloquium focuses on Korean, Han, Jung, and other human sentiments, which Ambassador Stevens so nicely explained for us. Half a century and five years ago, when I was a student at Berkeley, and I was a real punk then, I was once invited by a Girl Scout group to give a lecture on Korea. The lady who came to pick me up advised me to make it as simple as possible, because the German student who spoke previously, 1 month before me, made all those little Girl Scout girls bewildered and sucked their thumbs. The topic was to those little girls, the post-World War II economic reconstruction of Germany. So I followed the lady's advice and started this way. I'm a Korean and I lived all my life in Korea, so there's nothing which I don't know about Korea. So why don't you ask me any question? And a cute little blonde girl at the front row raised her hand and asked me, "What is your name?" Well, I'm an honest man, so I couldn't answer, but my name is Hoagy. And then she asked me again, "What is your name in Korean?" And the answer was, of course, the same, Hoagy. And she tilted her head and murmured to herself, "Gee, that's interesting." No doubt, she was expecting to hear something very different from a name familiar to the American ear. One should break into laughter at this junction, huh? We laughed because the kids didn't know differentiate similarity then and differences across the Pacific. We may find the episode charming, but we grown-ups also frequently fall into the trap of many preconceptions, most often influenced by superficial differences in the other's physical appearances, clothing, and manners. The founding fathers of the United States chose a pluribus unum, meaning one among many, as their motto for nation building. Is it not the very same thing as the teaching of Chinese Confucius, Gongzi? 허라 부동, 화이부동인 Korea. Hahn Moo-Sook, in her life and literature, sought for harmony among human beings and the ultimate salvation of mankind. I look forward to learning a lot from our distinguished speakers today and tomorrow. I expect to be fascinated to hear about all kinds of different topics and approaches to understand them. I know the Hahn Moo-Sook Colloquium in the Korean Humanities will allow us to become wiser and kinder by a true dialogue and interest in each other, and to live in harmony with each other for a peaceful world. Finally, I join you all in wishing an enjoyable and fruitful colloquium. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kim. It's so great to have you back at GW. Our next speaker is Professor, which you all know, Professor Kim-Renaud, who is the founder of this colloquium and also a daughter of Hahn Moo-Sook. She will now speak in memory of Hahn Moo-Sook, and she is Senior Advisor to the Institute for Korean Studies and Professor Emeritus of Korean Language and Culture International Affairs at GW. Please welcome Professor Kim-Renaud.
Good morning. Thank you very much to be here in this rainy Friday morning. And I'm really touched to see so many of you. Actually, even though typically we have more than 150 people registered, they come in and out at different speeds. So at one time, it doesn't look as if you have so many registrants. But because of the lunch and everything, we do have to limit the number of registrants. Anyway, one thing I want to make very clear is the HMS Colloquium series in the Korean Humanities is not about Hahn Moo-Sook. It is to celebrate her life and her contribution. So rarely we do actually cover her as a topic. And it's the same this year. We are not going to talk about Hahn Moo-Sook. But for her 90th birthday, we did cover the entire colloquium. We did cover her life and literature. This time, since it's the 100th birthday, Jisoo felt maybe we should do something just to explain, because people do wonder who is Hahn Moo-Sook after all, because she's known to some but not to all the others who so faithfully frequent our colloquium series. And one thing I'm bad about is trying to be very brief and articulate and impressive, so I began writing, and my paper became 25 pages. So I'll try to do my best to rush through, and I need a kind of a midpoint warning so that I don't really run too long. So I'll read the introduction fully so that if I run out of time, at least you will have some idea what it's about. So from our young age, my mother, Hahn Moo-Sook, told her children that her lifetime motto was 생활은 평범하게, 사고는 비범하게, meaning live like everyone else, think like no other. Looking back, Han's life was anything but ordinary. Yet, the characters she created in her works were completely ordinary human beings, even when they might appear superhuman or subhuman. What was extraordinary was how she could look at life through the eyes of so many different kinds of people, facing different circumstances with the individual choices they made based on their personal thoughts and beliefs. It was not just that her own ideas and creativity were unusual. Han believed a person could constantly improve, and she worked extremely hard toward perfection in everything she did, from the most banal things to very sophisticated international affairs. And in, of course, teaching foreign languages completely through individual studies. In the end, what we children got was a lesson to be modest and not to be extravagant in our lifestyle, but to be bold and reflective in our thinking, to learn constantly from others, but not just go with the flow. In this paper, I'll offer, to the extent it is possible, personal memories and observations about Hahn Moo-Sook as a human being and as a writer. I will attempt to do so, not so much as her daughter, but as an objective academic chronicle. So, let me... Hahn Moo-Sook was an ultimate Confucian in that she believed that man is perfectible. For such a goal, she felt it necessary to do everything with sincerity, passion, and devotion, which could be best represented all at once by one Chinese character pronounced Song in Korean, Chang in Chinese, considered the most important concept by the famous Confucian philosopher Yulgo, whom Han admired deeply. So she often mentioned that even when you clean a room, you should do it as if it was the only thing you had to do in the world. Then you will develop a liking for it and eventually become better at it. Most important, Han's pursuit of creativity did not translate as utter freedom from or disregard of any norms. On the contrary, she read and researched both East Asian and Western literature with intensity. In living and thinking, she sought three universal values: truth, goodness, and beauty. And I have actually a long example for each of those items. So how she strove to be authentic, did the research as if she were doing a PhD dissertation, for example, doing a novel on Dasan Jeongyagyong, and how everything had to be beautiful. If it's not costing any more than you have to pay. So even the most banal things like putting a plain plates on the table, you had to put it in a certain way. She would readjust even my table setting, even with the cheapest. But she also changed, her notion of beauty was being in harmony. So it's a whole question of aesthetics, not just in appearance, but in spirit. It boiled down to what my brother Hoagy just talked about, harmony, being fitting the context in which anything or any event occurs. So I'm going to skip a lot here. Just kind of show you some slides. So I talked about her search for truth and all this really academic research she got engaged in. But some came not only through her effort, but through some chance. But of course, you know, chances arrive to those who are prepared. So this is one example of how she discovered or she met her protagonist at an academic conference. So you can tell how unusual she was. I will go into this later. She's only high school educated, but she was attending these very high-level academic conferences because she saw no boundary in her curiosity and also research. There is talking about authenticity. My mother actually has a section quite dedicated rather importantly to the description of the cathedral in Beijing. And last year I had an opportunity to go back to Beijing, and I wanted to, this time, not to miss going to the cathedral to compare the edifice with what my mother was saying. And then initially I was kind of taken aback. It was very different from what she was describing in the novel. And then I read kind of pamphlet describing, and they said actually the thing had been raised down by many times, but most recently by Boxer Rebellion rebels, and the edifice dates from only 1904. So how did she get her description? She did it from researching the real diary notes of a scholar, very serious scholar of the time. So in a way, it is a record of the description covers something maybe even current Chinese cannot even know about. Maybe at this point I just look at the slides and so this is something literary critic Gu Jung-seo said it's a craftsmanship. It's actually more than that. We call 장인의식. So it's someone who polishes and polishes and polishes until it's just right. But she actually was famous for being a 현모 양처. 현모 means wise mother and good wife. And she, in fact, was the fifth 신사임당. 신사임당 is the mother of that philosopher I just mentioned, Yulgo, who was an accomplished artist, poet, but she's also famous to have produced these fine scholar officials. So the requirement, I understand, is you have to have done something good yourself, but you are known to be a good mother in the sense you produce some notable children, and then your husband is of some achievement as well. So this is a picture of the part of the ceremony, and then the official portrait. And Professor Young Kim at the University of Hawaii says, in fact, Han is famous for kind of not going off the path of a traditionally ideal woman, but then she still manages to deal with the current issues. And I just mentioned a while ago, she taught herself English. She didn't, because of her health, even though she did have a high school diploma, even that she went to school only for half of the time. She was usually hospitalized for half of the year. But she spoke English to such an extent she could give lectures at universities, including Harvard. And even in 1965, she had an official interview by Los Angeles Times, which had a major coverage on her with a huge portrait of her with a teacup and quoted. So, although she was known to be a 현모 양처, she said writing seemed like a satisfying act of defense against the established order and my lot in life. By speaking of the lot, a shock of her life was she grew up in a very progressive environment, coming from very highly educated people with a fantastic library collection. And she was a real modern woman with some shoes, like glass shoes with no heels, but that kind of thing, and millions of hats. And then she was married into an archie-conservative family, which we called the Nakyang. They went to the country lamenting the country's state because she was born during the Japanese occupation. So that was a real shock, and she talks about it in this newspaper interview. She also predicted we have a woman, maybe there will be a woman president, and actually her prophecy was realized. Her English was good enough. She, not only good enough, my father also was he was a banker. He was the only banker who spoke English at the time. So they were actually called cultural ambassadors of Korea, because both of them spoke Korean, and we lived in a Korean-style home. But they renovated so that we didn't have to feel awkward about bathrooms and things. So they had a Korean house with a renovated section, so that foreign guests didn't feel too uncomfortable. And one of the visitors we had actually many Nobel laureates as well as very low rank American soldiers, privates of the lowest rank, as well as Europeans at the time. I remember even seeing Czech and some French, and so it was a very international environment. And here you can see John Updike. And I chose this picture because when we had the 175th anniversary of the founding of the George Washington University, he was a keynote speaker. And since I was one of the faculty members, when we were marching out, I happened to be walking next to him. And I asked, maybe you don't remember because it happened 20 years or 25 years ago, but I know you went to my home. And he said, who? Which one? So I said, Hahn Moo-Sook, and he described the cloisonné design on the chopsticks and spoons. So I said, this is what makes a writer. You need very fine observation, which is based on your curiosity and knowledge, but you have to remember it. And then you should be able to describe it. So this is very similar to how my mother works. And it's no surprise that they clicked. I corresponded with him even until he passed away at his very late age, and every time he said, I read the beautiful memory, or something like that. So this is remarkable. Nobody knows about it because nobody ever wrote about it. Here I wrote. Okay, so originally Hahn Moo-Sook was not a writer. She had really multiple talents. She was really incredibly unusual because whatever she did, I think she did. Oh, I'm so sorry, that's my phone. Can you take my... So, sorry. Just turn it off, thank you. Sorry. So, she did everything with this song this devotion and passion and eagerness. So she eventually did become good in everything. And that included the painting. So her work was presented to Berlin in the, when she was just 8 years old. So this newspaper serialized a novel by then famous Kim-Renaud, another woman writer. She serialized also her painting, and you can see there in the picture over here, maybe, I don't know how the pointer works. That this is actually school uniform on the left side down. You can see the high school girl. And because they called it actually Sarah, it was a sailor's shape at that time. So this older lady and my mother, and even more remarkable is it was not my mother who began serializing the painting. In the beginning, it was almost monopolizing Lee Sang-bom Cheongjeon, very famous painter, that she fired because she didn't like his illustrations. So my mother picked it up. Imagine the boldness of the writer of the time to hire a high schooler and going against somebody who was God at the time in illustrations. So let's see. And she was a mother of 5, and 2 of us are here today. And then there was this middle brother who was an MD, and this would make her second shock of her life because he was a resident in American at the University of Cincinnati Hospital when he passed away of an accident, traffic accident. And this goes to kind of my little coverage of emotions. She said writers should write with dry eyes. After he passed away, because he was the only one not wearing glasses in our family. He had the perfect teeth. He was perfect in everywhere. He was an MD, but he had the poetry and painting exhibition. He gave a concert with the Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra playing the cello. And he suddenly was no longer. And she was paralyzed physically and mentally, momentarily blinded. And then she had a very bad fall, so she almost got crippled. It was by less than 1 millimeter she missed being crippled. She took 1.5 years fully to just being a kind of not in this world. The only thing she wanted to do was to die, as she said how she felt when she first married, because she married my father without seeing me, except for once they met at Changgyeon in a group meeting. So the whole band from her family, whole band from his family came, and since my father was very shy and bashful, he stood in the back. And my uncle, who was called the Rock Hudson, he was very handsome and he was way in front, so she said, oh, that's okay. But then it was not the same. So the second shock was when my brother passed away. And after 1.5 years, she finally could no longer cry. Her tears dried up from exhaustion. That's when she wrote, but people could not read what she wrote without tears. So this one, exceptionally, I read. Now I know truly that I am without you. I never realized before what sorrow it is to watch the moon rise, the sunset, the clouds float, and the wind blow. How can the sun still rise and the stars twinkle when you are not here? Everything is absurd to me. In spite of what I have just mentioned, there is a huge puzzle among the established literary criticism of Korean literature. There is a myth or claim that Hahn Moo-Sook was unknown. And somebody mentioned it once, and the others who actually think you should be talking like that kept repeating in spite of. So here is a story. When she passed away, I thought I would do a volume with collected short stories in translation, because Hahn Moo-Sook actually is very famous for her major 2 novels published in translation by university presses in America. She's actually more famous for her short stories. So I wanted to do this collection, and whenever people wrote all the nice kind of letters of condolences, I said, actually you knew her, would you mind doing a translation of one of her works? So almost everybody said, except for Brother Anthony, said he had many other things. But curiously, no 2 people fought for one story. There was only one story that was wanted by 2 people. Other than that, they naturally chose different things. It really is because of her incredible diversity of topics, approaches, and the angles from which these things were looked at. So, but then, you know how translation is. They were not only literary people, but linguists, professors, and doing even political scientists. So I only had a few that really were submitted to me. And some of them were very anxious about their tenure status. They wanted publication right away. So I contacted I submitted those to Korean Literature Today, which published a series of translated Korean stories, and all of them are accepted, fortunately. But when the first short story, which I just read, came out, I was really taken aback by the preface, which said, "One major woman writer who had to suffer particularly from prejudice during her lifetime was Hahn Moo-Sook." So they felt they were making a big discovery of her by publishing her stories in translation. But here I just like a foolish daughter, I'm listing all the things she was already very famous for. We were reading her things in high school textbooks. How could they say she was unknown? I will just not go too much into detail. And she was already representing Korea at many international pen meetings. And mainly because she was able to do it by being able to write and speak in English, but mainly because of her analytic mind. So you see this, the international conferences where she is actually the first picture is about her participation in Yugoslavia. At that time, Yugoslavia was a communist nation. It was off limits to any Korean citizen, but she was very warmly welcomed there. And one thing I didn't mention is when people met Hahn Moo-Sook, they got surprised 3 times. They were surprised by her stunning beauty. This is not a plastic surgery Korean. She her skin was incredibly like a baby's until she died. And she had very simple but very elegant dresses. She loved to make her own dresses. She even painted her designs on Korean dresses. And when we went to Comédie Française in Paris upon our arrival, she and I went in complete Korean dresses with some nice jewels to impress. And we were accompanied by my future husband and his brother. And as we were walking down, the crowd split as if they were receiving two princesses. She was very, very impressive. And of course, I was like a shadow, but she shined. And her publications, especially the two major novels, got more international reviews than any other people I know. Probably because they were university presses, but because people liked it. We had incredibly glorious reviews. There were maybe 3 which, among good comments, said something bad, maybe because they felt they were required to, but it was clear that they didn't understand the original work very well. But of course, it's my point of view. Whatever they wrote, we learned a lot from them. And actually, even the author said, oh, I didn't know I meant that. But actually, maybe true. So, talking about versatility of, versatility of my mother, she had a beautiful voice as well. So, all those songs for which she didn't know the language, like Italian and German, she taught us those lyrics in the original language. So I still remember we grew up singing Sul mare luccica, astro d'argento. We didn't know what he was talking about, but we could sing it. Same thing with Schubert's Lindenbaum, you know. So Hambrun and Fodentore, da steht ein Lindenbaum. So so I thought only we learned, but I learned last week, actually 2 weeks ago, my aunt, who's also a writer, Hahn Moo-Sook, said she taught her also those songs. So I was authenticated. Okay, I think I'm running out of time. So I will still have to mention something about my mother. He was part of that rigid, very arch-traditional family, but my mother reconciled, not only reconciled, it worked as an incredible source of creativity because she began discovering the essence of their culture. After all, the two got married because their fathers were childhood friends. They were from the same social class, same values. Not only that, my father was also a very modern, young, intellectual, educated man with incredible curiosity. And very much unlike all the other men, maybe, of the time, he was very proud of his wife's writing. At that time of penury, during the Pacific War, that's when my mother debuted. And there was because in Korea you have to have an official writing paper, one goji. You cannot just write anywhere and then submit. And he mimeographed, I don't know, 1,500 pages of the first novel she wrote, all by hand for her. What husband would have done that? So people really underestimate. They all think because he was from an arch-conservative family and she was so shocked, she got over her son's death somehow, once she accepted it, but she never got over the shock of getting into a new family. But at the end, that was a source of her creativity and, in a way, true understanding of her own self and others. So I will not go into anything other than maybe quoting a couple of critics. So Chani Park said how Korean literature can be modern without alienation from the larger Korean literary and cultural tradition is proven by Hahn Moo-Sook. And one of the reasons why she's not read so much, maybe they say you need so much more knowledge than usual creative work. So these two people contest to that fact. And then, of course, in our very degree-conscious society, she was only a high school graduate. And then she was so perfect. I mean, she even knitted a whole sweater while waiting for her kid to go through an entrance examination. She was fast and good and very creative. She made suits for my brother. Suits, not just sweaters. She made our shoes out of all many myriad fashionable hats. And then, of course, there was a class thing, because writers had to be writing something ideological in her time. So maybe that's my apologia. So this is a summary of her life. She lived a life of continued progress. After all, her life was not actually that unusual because it was very ordinary in her standards. And she never wasted time. She was a hard worker. She's famous for having worked through the nights. And then her sense of independence was phenomenal in spite of the constraints she was thrown into. But best of all, she was very lucky to be born with the good nature of loving human beings. So every one of us, in every one of her encounters has been beneficial to her and to the others. So I am very grateful I was her daughter and her daughter. And it's a big thank you for being friends of GW, of Hahn Moo-Sook, and for being there together to celebrate the 100th birthday of Hahn Moo-Sook. 감사합니다.